Alright, picture this, a family gathering in Beijing. And right there is a son in his late 20s. Elders are labeling him as a good son, successful job, and high education. He's smiling, pouring tea, answering every question except the one he's terrified of, girlfriends. On the outside, he's the ideal Chinese man, but behind the scenes, he's living a life that both honors and simultaneously subverts the skewed definition of the good son.
Oof, that's already intense.
Well, that's the most cinematic tea pouring ever.
Damn, I feel bad for him. Not gonna lie, I'm already stressed for him.
Good. That means you're in the right headspace. Welcome to Tea with Confucius, where we sip Chinese tea and unpack masculinity and queer culture in China through an intersectional lens. I'm Joanne, joining you from Seoul, and I'm here with my three lovely co-hosts.
I'm Hatim, importing my thoughts from Pakistan.
And I'm Ray, tuning in from Mongolia.
And I'm Arnold from Hong Kong.
Today we're diving into our major topic, how Chinese queer men perform, hybridize, or subvert traditional ideals in their everyday lives. To guide our discussion, we'll break down our talk into three subsections. Firstly, self-identity and presentation. Second, differences between rural versus urban experiences. And finally, the role of Chinese economic status and education.
And today's not just going to be about theory, guys. We have some twists. We've got actual letters, anonymous and non-anonymous, from queer men navigating life in China right now. So yeah, we're going to let them lead the conversation.
And we're definitely not censoring anything.
Yeah, absolutely not. This seems interesting. And before we open the first letter, I want us to ground ourselves in what traditional Chinese masculinity expects in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah, Chinese Confucian masculinity is built on Wen and Wu, the scholar and the protector. Together they perform the proper man, disciplined, filial, restrained, reliable. And I'll be upfront here, masculinity and family expectations run deep, way beyond personal feelings in China. I really question whether queer identity can coexist within those frameworks or whether it has to push against them.
Okay. Our team's coming in strong today.
And let's buckle up, everyone.
Perfect timing, though.
Because Arnold, you're the one opening our first letter.
Okay, wow, this is already a heavy topic for our younger generation today. I mean, imagine being a young gay man knowing the biggest expectation of your family has for you is to get married and carry the family line.
Exactly.
That's a lot. Anyways, this brings us to our first listener's letter. I will pass the time to Hatim to read the first letter.
All right, the first letter reads, Dear Tea with Confucius, I'm a 25-year-old employed male from China. Outwardly, I'm a model citizen, but I'm secretly gay, trying to balance both worlds. Every Chinese New Year, I get asked, when will you get married, or do you have a girlfriend? I usually dodge with work. Before the 80s, queer men often had sham marriages to fulfill filial duties. I'm grateful I don't have to since I'm financially independent. Though, I still support my parents. The hardest part isn't hiding, it's the guilt. My parents love me, and though they probably sense something, they've never asked directly. My partner and I dream of a family, yet surrogacy is illegal and two dads is complicated. Thanks for covering this topic, and I look forward to your discussion.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, my heart actually stings a little.
Same, I could feel the guilt in every sentence.
Yeah, and the conflict, it's so internalized, right?
And the expectation for men from family and society are already intense. Adding sexual identity on top is like pressure doubled.
True.
Life becomes a balancing act. Well, speaking of which, this letters remind me of something. Have you guys heard of the Xinhun? Well, it's basically two people getting married knowing that there's no love, just to tick the boxes, to fulfill the expectations. And it's like, sham marriage back in the 80s never left.
Yeah, Arnold, I've actually heard of that before. And honestly, I'm quite relieved that it's becoming less popular in China. Because, yes, it seems to me that the arrangement of Xinhun only resolves the pressures to marry in theory.
Yeah.
But actually, in reality, I feel like it just forces LGBTQ people, especially gay men, from what history shows in China, to keep pretending forever and keep up the act.
Yeah.
It protects their face, but not happiness. While it also reinforces our heterosexual family institutions that directly marginalizes same-sex relations overall in China and are projected to be protected.
Exactly.
And look, from a South Korean perspective, it is weird to say this, but the decline of Xinhun in China is progress. I feel like many people in South Korea, and me included, would envy. Because as of 2025, marriage and same-sex unions here are not recognized, and although being gay is technically legal, it still remains highly stigmatized. But at the same time, I guess I do praise the rise of K-pop culture. The way male idols play with masculinity, with makeup, fashion, and beauty in general, really did expand the realms of masculine ideals. And I actually have a quote from a university professor that states that the way K-pop stars play with masculinity and what it means to be a beautiful man in both a heterosexual or non-heterosexual way through the popularization of such beauty tools does open up the possibilities for all the choices that men can have.
Interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate all that actually, but I'll be honest, this letter raises difficult questions for me, and I struggle to understand, So when a man has to live two separate lives, one for family and one for himself, I can't help asking, does that strengthen masculinity or does it eventually erode it, right?
Yeah, interesting.
Traditional Chinese masculinity is built on clarity of duty. So it's pretty clear in Chinese culture what your duty is as a man. And Mingfen means knowing your role as a son, a future father, and you also work towards the continuation of your family line. And this is a core culture and traditional values of China. And filial piety isn't really random, right? It's a core pillar of Confucian identity. So, when queer men have to hide or negotiate around this system, I struggle to see how it fits within the traditional framework. I'm not saying this emotional burden isn't real, it definitely is, but I also think shifting these norms risks weakening something central to Chinese masculinity and something very important and ideal to it, right? Even Xinghun shows how incompatible these expectations can become. I'm not saying queer men can't have fulfilling lives, they definitely can, but there's tension here that just can't be, rolled over.
Well, Hatim, that's a distressing take, but it is a really valid one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from, Hatim. But here's the thing, though. Sometimes, Xingfeng isn't just fake masculinity. It still can be a very real solution for people who are in a very deeply traditional or conservative environment. Even though you have a point that it's eroding Chinese masculinity, but also at the same time, I think it's a strategy for queer men to survive in a hostile society.
That's true.
For example, in Mongolia, where a culture is almost shaped by the history of Genghis Khan, all full of various era where they even banned homosexuality in the 30th century. There's a deep standard and expectation for what a man should be in our country. And it's extremely difficult to be a queer man shaped by a history like that. It's not that they're eroding masculinity, but trying to find a way forward and try not to lose their identity, family, and social status in society that is not ready for them. And honestly, that resilience and mental strength can be also masculinity too.
That's true, very true.
Yeah, and the letter suddenly feels so much heavier after hearing your examples from Mongolia too.
Yeah, I actually respect that.
Yeah, but we are just still on the first one.
Oh, that's crazy.
The last segment got really heated.
Very true.
Yeah, but in a good way though. And honestly, it shows how personal and cultural contexts really do shape how we understand masculinity in China. So speaking of this context, this leads perfectly into our next topic, rural versus urban China, and how these internal migration changes the identity and struggles of queer men. Now, I've got a letter from Xiaoming, a 24-year-old IT worker from rural Yunnan. Now let's read it. To the tea with Confucius hosts. My hometown is a typical Chinese village where everyone knows each other and basically gossips about everything. In my second year of high school, I brought my boyfriend home, telling my parents he was just a close classmate. We spent a lot of time together in my room, and soon rumors were everywhere. My parents asked my boyfriend to leave and told me to keep my distance from him. Soon after that, they pushed me to go on blind dates and get married right after high school. I slowly realized that my parents, being undereducated farmers in poor health, would never accept my sexuality. I've decided to never come out after it because of them, and because I don't want to accept them. But that means spending the rest of my life carrying this secret. Wow, this letter really hits hard.
That's so harsh.
Yeah.
Right. The part that really got me was how he had to bear this secret for his whole life. That just sounds like emotional self-sacrifice disguised as filial duty. He seems like he's performing the role of a good son to protect his vulnerable parents, but at the cost of himself.
Yeah, that's so disappointing.
Exactly. And look, if Xiaoming did move to a big city like Shanghai or Shenzhen, I do think things would be a bit different though. I read in a journal article that urban anonymity gives young men, young gay men especially, the freedom to explore their identity away from family surveillance in places such as bars, queer communities, and even unadvertised underground networks. The city really does let you suspend traditional masculinity for a moment.
Yeah.
But I do guess in this way, migration doesn't erase who you are when you're back home, and instead creates a double life. The city becoming the space for your authentic self, while the hometown becomes a stage for your heterosexual performance.
So it's like a parallel life.
Exactly. And it's not full liberation. It seems as a taxing form of emotional labor that forces a man to constantly navigate the conflicting demands of his identity. What do you guys think about this?
Yeah.
Indeed. Like urban anonymity is a big deal. Like in huge cities, the feeling of no one recognizes you makes you free. And well, what makes it more intense is that when you put rural area in contrast, villages are very closely knitted, and everyone knows everyone, and people within a family are always tied within the family reputation. So the pressure to keep in line is so much bigger, and the story isn't surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same emotional punch as you guys do, but I want to highlight something a bit uncomfortable.
Okay.
So, I apologize in advance. Yeah. So, rural China does carry the deepest Confucian roots, clarity of roles, continuation of the family line, and the duty between parents and children. So, when Xiaoming's parents reacted with fear and urgency, in their worldview, it wasn't just discrimination, it was protecting the family's future and social standing. And here's where my view might differ from the rest of you.
Okay.
I don't think traditional Chinese masculinity has enough flexibility to fully accept complete deviation from these norms, right? A slight deviation might actually work, right? But a complete, such as in this case, might not. So urban anonymity gives you freedom, yes, I agree, but it doesn't change the structural expectations of masculinity, filial piety, responsibility, and lineage, right? So migration just widens the split between identity and duty. So while I empathize with Xiaoming, I also think he understands that for rural China, some values remain non-negotiable and you can't do anything about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I get what you mean, and I agree that cultural norms sometimes outweigh personal freedom. But let me throw another angle. In history, it shows that masculinity can change, though, because take Mongolia, for example. Mongolia had an up and down relationship with homosexuality across history. Hyper-masculinity was a huge because of our very history, Genghis Khan era, the whole what a real man should be thing. Homosexuality was even banned in the 30th century, remember? Before that, in the shamanic era, and even under the Buddhist influence until the 17th century, there was acceptance of gender diversity. And then the socialist period shut it down again. Now, after the fall of Soviet Union in the 1990s, Mongolia is slowly opening up to it again. Not perfect, but still struggling and shifting. So I'm thinking, why can't China evolve too? Why can't urban migration can be an example and the start of a slow cultural shift in how masculinity is understood and expressed?
Right, that's such an interesting point, Ray. I like how you discuss Mongolians' historical perspective. I've never realized that. So I guess in that sense, migration does create freedom and new identities in the modern societies, but the weight of family, community, and cultural context doesn't disappear overnight.
Yeah.
So while identities do or may change in urban environments, the obligation does seem to follow you everywhere.
Yeah, and just like that, this segment doesn't feel any lighter as well.
We're not even halfway through the episode.
Yeah, someone refill my metaphorical tea, please.
Right. We're gonna need actual tea after this because segment 3 is just as intense.
Okay, final letter of the episode, and it's a heavy one. Let's hear from Leon, a queer man navigating both financial limitations and social expectations in a small town in China. Here it goes. Hi, Tea with Confucius. My name is Leon, and I'm a queer man from a small town in China, and my social status affects how I live and express myself. I work as a part-time server at the local restaurant, and I only finished high school because of financial difficulty. So unlike some of my privileged friends, I can't be open about my identity. Not only a financial issue, but the pressure to meet society's expectation of what men should be. I read research that says coming out is good for health if you have higher income and education, but for people like me, it feels the opposite. The environment here is hostile to queer men who don't fit the traditional men role. Many queer men with more resources seem to have more freedom to express themselves, but for me, being open would mean risking everything, my family, my community. Sometimes I wonder if a more open life will ever be possible. Thanks for listening.
That seems tough.
Yeah, and I can feel the fear in it.
And the exhaustion as well, like he's constantly negotiating with the world just to survive.
Exactly, and what stood out to me was the research you mentioned. Queer men with low socioeconomic status were more likely to live in a hostile environment that expect traditional masculinity.
Yeah.
Right. To add on to your point, it does seem like both human or social capital in the form of educational status and the obvious economic statuses does play a major role in how masculinity is perceived in China.
Yeah, but like research literally shows that gay men who are more feminine, bigger bodied, or like lower income face exclusion from the gay community too. Like the same pressures repeat. Isn't that interesting?
That's so
Right.
discriminating.
Well, that's the sad thing, no? Humans rank everything. Inside or outside the community, everyone chases the ideals.
But who even decides the ideal?
Well, humans are subjective, so we have our own ideals, but let's just say sometimes thoughts converge.
Yeah.
But you know what? I learned that there's a whole new category called bears
Whoa.
within the
Whoa.
LGBT community.
Really?
We're big and
Bears.
hairy and, well, they are even gaining popularity within the Chinese community.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like acceptance depends on your circumstances, on how you look and where you land socially, right? Basically.
Yeah, but
Right,
back to
right.
Leon, he's saying to us that he doesn't have the privilege to be open.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. You know, if you're barely getting by, supporting family, and trying to keep a place in the community, coming out isn't liberation, you know? It's self-destruction. You're destructing yourself and your family, right? And honestly, this also reflects China as a whole. They're one of the fastest growing global powers, and they put a lot of emphasis and focus on maintaining stability.
True.
So,
Right.
from that perspective, if we look, right, it's actually a good thing he isn't disrupting the national order or going against the system, because there might be some circumstances, you know.
Exactly. If you lose your job and your family rejects you, then you're cold.
Yeah, I get that, but even like queer men who do have money still get punished for being open. Like research shows that gay men earn less than straight men with the same background and skills. It's not just about salary too. In like some places like 18 states in the US, people can even get fired for just being queer. So with the high status and all, they still get discriminated against.
Leon's problem is bigger than discrimination. Masculinity in China is tied to being a responsible citizen and not just a provider, but also being a well-rounded citizen all in all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you don't get a margin of error.
Exactly.
But that's the reality, you know. Well, the queer men can sometimes challenge norms. Leon can't without losing everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so unfair. Like he shouldn't have to choose.
Yeah, I think that's the line, yeah.
All right, before we wrap up, let's circle back to our big guiding question. How do queer men in China perform, hybridize, or subvert traditional Chinese masculinity? When you look at the three leaders together, the pattern is very clear. Wealth didn't guarantee freedom. City life also didn't guarantee freedom. And being in the gay community itself didn't guarantee freedom either.
I agree with you, Ray, that what is clear is that queer men in China are not passively accepting or wholly rejecting tradition. They're becoming active agents, creatively and often painfully carving out spaces for them to belong, adapt, and live amongst the various Chinese contexts they face today.
Yeah, like the first letter, he was financially independent but still tangled up with filial piety.
Yeah, and in the second letter, like in the rural versus urban landscape, city life gave
Right.
space to breathe, but didn't erase that pressure from home.
And for Leon, like money and class literally decided if he would express himself or not.
Yeah, so there's basically not one strategy. They're all trying to make it work however they can.
Exactly. Sometimes they conform, sometimes they subvert masculinity, and sometimes they blend it into something in between.
Yeah, exactly, right? But it's never random, you see. Every move is calculated, you know, like survival. being like a good son, being masculine, being queer, they're constantly juggling different roles.
Yeah, masculinity doesn't disappear. It just gets reshaped so they can get by.
I think that's the key takeaway. I think queer men in China aren't passive. They're just navigating centuries of tradition in real time, one decision at a time, and when it's appropriate.
Yeah, all right. That's all for today's episode of Tea with Confucius. Huge thanks to everyone who trusted us with their letters. We really appreciate it.
We really do.
And next week, we're gonna jump into queer media. It's gonna be a fun one.
Exactly. Until then, Take care of yourselves and drink some Chinese tea.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.